15 black actors who were drunk all the time. Behind the glitzy awards and thunderous applause of Hollywood lies a graveyard of talent drowned in a sea of high-proof spirits. We celebrate their genius, but what if the very liquid courage that fueled their legendary performances was actually a slow-acting poison? From the soulful wails of Whitney Houston to the sharp-witted fire of Richard Pryor, 15 icons turned the bottle into a deceptive sanctuary, masking a reality too painful to inhabit sober. Welcome to Black Excellence Legends. Today we're unmasking the raw, unfiltered truth behind the fame. Stop what you're doing and hit that subscribe button right now, because the stories we're about to tell will change the way you see your idols forever. Billie Holiday. Billie Holiday, affectionately christened Lady Day, remains an unparalleled pillar of jazz history, yet her existence was a turbulent sea of immense talent and profound sorrow. Born into a world of crushing poverty and systemic neglect, Eleanor Fagan sought refuge in the smoky atmosphere of Harlem nightclubs. Her vocal style, characterized by unique phrasing and an almost instrumental quality, revolutionized how singers approached tempo and emotion. However, beneath the gardenias pinned to her hair lay a psyche fractured by early trauma and the relentless pressures of a segregated society. Alcohol served as Holiday's primary, albeit destructive, anesthetic. In an era where jazz musicians often operated on the fringes of polite society, heavy drinking was frequently woven into the professional fabric. For Billie, gin and whiskey weren't merely social lubricants, they were essential shields against the crushing weight of loneliness and racial hostility. Critics often noted that as her dependency deepened, her voice grew raspier and more fragile, transforming from a nimble instrument into a haunting, weary vessel of lived experience. The intersection of her alcoholism and narcotics use led to a tragic decline that was played out in the public eye. Despite her status as a global icon, she was hounded by federal authorities, famously being arrested on her deathbed at Metropolitan Hospital. The physical toll was devastating. Cirrhosis of the liver and cardiovascular failure eventually silenced the woman who gave the world strange fruit. At just 44 years old, Holiday's passing in 1959 marked the end of a hauntingly beautiful era. Her legacy survives as a cautionary masterpiece of artistic genius, grappling with the corrosive nature of substance abuse, reminding us that the most soul-stirring melodies often emerge from the deepest wells of personal agony. Richard Pryor. Richard Pryor remains the undisputed titan of modern stand-up, a genius who transmuted harrowing personal trauma into revolutionary art. Raised in the visceral environment of a brothel managed by his grandmother, Pryor's formative years were steeped in neglect and physical brutality. These scars fueled a comedic fire that was both blisteringly honest and profoundly vulnerable. By the mid-1970s, he had dismantled the safe conventions of comedy, replacing them with a raw, unfiltered exploration of race identity and the human condition. Yet, as his professional accolades mounted, including multiple Grammy Awards and Emmy wins, the internal demons he attempted to outrun through humor found a dangerous ally in heavy liquor and illicit substances. For Pryor, alcohol was an omnipresent companion that blurred the lines between his stage persona and his private torment. He frequently consumed massive quantities of top-shelf spirits, such as cognac and vodka, to insulate himself from the crippling anxiety of his success. This dependency wasn't a solitary vice. It often merged with a volatile addiction to freebase cocaine, creating a chemical cocktail that fueled erratic behavior and terrifying episodes of violence. The zenith of this self-destruction occurred in 1980, when a drug and alcohol-induced psychosis led to him dousing himself in rum and setting his body ablaze. This horrific accident, which left him with third-degree burns over half his body, became a permanent physical manifestation of his internal inferno. Despite surviving the fire and attempting several stints in rehabilitation, the long-term physiological toll of his binge drinking was irreversible. The combination of chronic substance abuse and the onset of multiple sclerosis in the late 1980s caused a rapid deterioration of his motor functions and cognitive sharpness. Pryor's later years were marked by a poignant struggle to maintain his dignity as his nervous system buckled under the weight of past excesses. When he passed away from a massive heart attack in 2005, at the age of 65, the world lost a visionary who had stared into the abyss of addiction and dared to find the joke within. His life stands as a monumental cautionary tale that even the most brilliant laughter cannot fully drown out the quiet, corrosive siren song of the bottle. Whitney Houston. Whitney Houston, universally revered as the voice, possessed a celestial mezzo-soprano that defined the sonic landscape of the 1980s and 90s. With a record-breaking string of consecutive #1 hits, she embodied an almost supernatural perfection, blending gospel roots with polished pop elegance. However, this meticulously curated veneer masked a turbulent internal reality. As the global demands of her superstardom intensified, the pristine girl-next-door image became a suffocating straitjacket. To navigate the relentless scrutiny of the paparazzi and the grueling exhaustion of world tours, Houston increasingly pivoted toward chemical escapism, with high-proof alcohol serving as a deceptive anchor in her chaotic personal storm. For Whitney, heavy drinking was not merely a celebratory byproduct of fame. It became a clandestine ritual to numb the profound insecurities and domestic volatility that plagued her private years. While her public battles with illicit substances garnered more headlines, the quiet daily erosion caused by chronic alcohol consumption was equally devastating to her instrument. Alcohol dehydrates the vocal folds and inflames the delicate tissues of the throat, gradually stripping her legendary register of its crystalline clarity and effortless power. Fans began to notice a raspier, more labored delivery during live televised events, a heartbreaking sonic signature of a body struggling to sustain its own brilliance under the weight of liquid dependency. The downward spiral culminated in several high-profile attempts at sobriety, including multiple stints in residential treatment facilities. Despite these efforts, the synergistic effect of alcohol and other substances took an irreversible toll on her cardiovascular health. On the eve of the 2012 Grammy Awards, the world was stunned by her untimely passing in a bathtub at the Beverly Hilton. The toxicology reports confirmed that chronic use had weakened her heart, making her final moments a tragic intersection of accidental drowning and the long-term biological consequences of addiction. At 48 years old, Houston left behind a monumental catalog of music and a sobering reminder that even the most divine gifts can be extinguished when the person behind the talent is left to suffer in the shadows of a bottle. Samuel L. Jackson. Samuel L. Jackson stands today as the highest-grossing actor of all time, a cinematic powerhouse whose commanding presence and rhythmic delivery have become legendary. However, before he became the iconic face of Cool Jackson, was a functional addict navigating the gritty theater scene of 1980s New York. While his peers saw a dedicated craftsman, Jackson was actually living a double life, fueled by a dangerous cocktail of high-proof spirits and illicit substances. For over a decade, he maintained a working addict lifestyle, believing that alcohol was the essential lubricant for his creative engine, a myth that nearly cost him his life before his global breakthrough. The turning point was not a slow fade, but a traumatic collision with reality. In 1991, his wife and daughter discovered him face down on the kitchen floor, incapacitated by a massive binge. This rock-bottom moment led to an immediate intervention and his subsequent admission into a detoxification facility. Unlike many of his contemporaries whose stories ended in eulogies, Jackson utilized his recovery as a springboard for an unprecedented professional metamorphosis. Just weeks after completing rehab, he stepped onto the set of Jungle Fever to play a crack addict, a role he performed with a raw, visceral authenticity because he was literally purging his own demons on camera. This performance earned him a special jury prize at Cannes, effectively launching the legendary career the world knows today. Now celebrating over 3 decades of continuous sobriety, Jackson's trajectory is a definitive blueprint for resilience. He frequently attributes his longevity and sharp mental acuity to his decision to abandon the bottle, noting that true artistic clarity only arrived once the chemical fog had lifted. He transitioned from a struggling stage actor to a global titan, proving that the most profound special effect in Hollywood isn't CGI, but the power of a clear mind. His legacy serves as a vibrant counter-narrative to the tragic artist trope, demonstrating that for some, the end of addiction is not just a survival tactic, but the actual beginning of a masterpiece. Ray Charles. Ray Charles, the high priest of soul, was a sonic revolutionary who dismantled the barriers between gospel, blues, and country. Blinded by glaucoma at age 7 and orphaned shortly after, Charles harnessed his sensory deprivation to develop a preternatural sensitivity to vibration and cadence. However, the grueling demands of the Chitlin circuit and the isolation of his sightless world led him into a decades-long entanglement with chemical dependency. While his 20-year struggle with heroin is well documented, his reliance on heavy spirits like gin and coffee, laced with sugar and bourbon, served as a quieter, persistent backdrop to his creative process. For Ray, these substances were not merely recreational. They were logistical tools used to calibrate his internal clock against the exhausting rhythms of constant travel. Throughout the 1950s and 60s, Charles maintained a rigorous professional discipline that masked the extent of his intake. He possessed an uncanny ability to navigate complex arrangements and recording sessions while under the influence, a feat of cognitive fortitude that amazed his contemporaries. Yet the synergy of alcohol and narcotics eventually fractured his legal standing and physical vitality. After a high-profile arrest in 1964, he famously pivoted away from hard drugs, but the void left by addiction was often filled by a heightened consumption of liquor. This transition is a classic psychological pivot known as cross-addiction, where the brain seeks a familiar dopaminergic reward through a different medium. Despite the internal chemical volatility, his musical output remained prolific, proving that his genius was an intrinsic force that even the strongest intoxicants could not fully extinguish. As he entered his later years, the cumulative physiological debt of his lifestyle began to manifest in chronic liver ailments and a decline in his immune response. Charles eventually achieved a fragile equilibrium, moderating his habits to preserve his legendary stamina for the stage. When he succumbed to liver failure in 2004, at the age of 73, the world mourned a man who had pioneered the soul genre while battling a relentless internal tide. His legacy is a complex tapestry of triumph over disability and the quiet, persistent struggle to maintain agency over his own mind. He remains a monumental figure who demonstrated that while the bottle can provide a temporary sanctuary from the darkness, true vision is an indestructible light that originates from within. Diana Ross. Diana Ross, the quintessential supreme, redefined the global standard for Black female stardom, evolving from a Motown ingenue into a cinematic force and solo icon. With an aesthetic defined by sequins, feathers, and an unwavering poise, Ross cultivated an image of untouchable elegance that captivated millions. However, this high-gloss exterior functioned as a psychological armor against the staggering pressures of an industry that demanded constant reinvention. As her solo career ascended, the logistical burdens of managing a massive business empire, navigating complex divorces, and maintaining a youthful public persona created a silent vacuum of stress. To alleviate the internal dissonance of being the diva while grappling with private anxieties, Ross increasingly turned to premium spirits as a private decompression chamber. The intersection of her professional perfectionism and personal dependency remained largely concealed until the early 2000s. Unlike many of her contemporaries whose struggles were punctuated by public brawls, Ross's intake was often characterized by a quiet domestic consistency. However, alcohol's cumulative physiological impact eventually manifested in a dramatic public incident in 2002. Her arrest for driving under the influence in Tucson, Arizona shattered the illusion of her flawless trajectory. With a blood alcohol concentration significantly above the legal threshold, the Stop in the Name of Love singer was forced to confront the reality that her private coping mechanism had become a public liability. This event served as a jarring reminder that even the most meticulous brand cannot insulate a human being from the corrosive neurological effects of chronic alcohol use. Following her brief incarceration and subsequent entry into a residential rehabilitation program, Ross underwent a profound personal recalibration. She transitioned away from the high-octane social cycles of her peak years, focusing instead on her health and her legacy as a mother. This period of recovery allowed her to reclaim her vocal stamina and stage presence without the chemical crutch that had previously clouded her judgment. Today at 81, Ross remains a vibrant performing artist, possessing a mental clarity that serves as a testament to the power of intervention. Her journey illustrates a crucial narrative that the pursuit of perfection is a heavy burden, and true strength lies not in never falling, but in the courage to strip away the glamorous mask and address the vulnerability beneath the glitter. Tracy Morgan. Tracy Morgan, the irrepressible force of nature behind Saturday Night Live and 30 Rock, built a career on high-octane absurdity and an unpredictable wild-card energy. Raised in the harrowing environment of Brooklyn's housing projects during the peak of the crack epidemic, Morgan utilized humor as a survival mechanism against systemic neglect and personal loss. However, as his stardom ascended, the line between his chaotic Tracy Morgan persona and his private reality began to dissolve. For decades, alcohol served as both a celebratory fuel and a numbing agent for deep-seated anxieties. His dependency was characterized by public volatility, multiple arrests for driving under the influence, and a reputation for being a liability on professional sets. The bottle had become a heavy anchor, threatening to drag his immense talent into the depths of a permanent professional exile. The definitive turning point for Morgan was not a gradual realization, but a catastrophic encounter with mortality. In 2014, a tragic highway collision involving a Walmart truck left Morgan in a coma with a traumatic brain injury and claimed the life of his close friend, James McNair. During his grueling recovery, the physical and cognitive stakes became starkly apparent. Morgan faced a choice: succumb to the physical pain and emotional trauma through his old habits, or embrace a rigorous path of sobriety to reclaim his cognitive functions. He chose the latter, famously stating that losing his family and his health was the ultimate wake-up call that no legal intervention could provide. His journey through rehabilitation was a profound exercise in humility, stripping away the bravado of his comedic mask to address the underlying fragility of his nervous system. Today at 57, Morgan stands as a vibrant testament to the possibility of a second act. His post-accident career is marked by a newfound clarity and a disciplined approach to his craft that was previously obscured by chemical interference. He often speaks with raw candor about the daily commitment required to remain sober, emphasizing that his survival was a divine second chance he refuses to squander. By abandoning the party animal archetype, Morgan has secured his legacy not just as a clown, but as a resilient survivor who conquered the invisible demons of addiction. His story illustrates a powerful narrative arc that while trauma can shatter a life, the decision to walk away from the bottle can provide the necessary glue to mend the pieces into something even more profound than before. Billie Dee Williams. Billie Dee Williams, the cinematic personification of cool, redefined black masculinity in Hollywood. Through his breakout roles in Lady Sings the Blues and his iconic portrayal of Lando Calrissian in the Star Wars saga. With a velvet voice and a charismatic gaze that could disarm any audience, Williams became the ultimate leading man. However, the immense pressure to maintain this suave, unflappable persona in a highly competitive and often exclusionary industry created a hidden emotional toll. To navigate the exhausting social demands of the A-list lifestyle and the anxieties of career longevity, Williams began to lean on premium spirits as a private decompression tool. What started as sophisticated social drinking gradually evolved into a consistent dependency that threatened to dull the very sharpness that made him a star. By the peak of his fame in the 1980s, the smooth actor was struggling with the physiological consequences of his intake. Alcohol began to interfere with his professional reliability. There were instances where the after effects of a night's drinking made it difficult to maintain the rigorous discipline required on high-stakes film sets. Williams has since reflected on how the bottle cost him lucrative opportunities and slowed the momentum of a career that should have been unstoppable. The chemical fog didn't just affect his work, it strained his interpersonal relationships and altered his legendary temperament. He realized that the charming image he presented to the world was increasingly at odds with a private reality marked by the sluggishness and irritability of chronic alcohol use. Today, at 88 years old, Williams stands as a dignified survivor of his own excesses. His decision to take control of his health and pivot away from heavy drinking allowed him to preserve his legacy and continue working into his twilight years, including a triumphant return to the Star Wars universe in Divi Tukstoshi Devon Potsmith. By shedding the chemical crutch, he reclaimed the mental clarity and physical stamina that define his current life as an artist and family man. His journey serves as a poignant reminder that even the most unshakable icons are humanly vulnerable, and that true suave sophistication is found not in a glass of scotch, but in the strength to face the world with an unclouded mind. Florence Ballard. Florence Ballard, the soulful founder and original powerhouse behind the Supremes, remains one of the most poignant cautionary tales in the annals of Motown. Gifted with a robust, gospel-infused soprano that initially defined the group's sound, Ballard was the emotional anchor of the trio. However, as Berry Gordy pivoted the spotlight toward Diana Ross, Ballard found herself systematically marginalized. This professional erasure, combined with the psychological scars of a previous sexual assault and the grueling isolation of life on the road, created a fertile ground for chemical dependency. To numb the sting of being demoted within her own creation, Florence began to seek solace in high-proof spirits, transforming from a vibrant young star into a weary soul seeking refuge at the bottom of a bottle. By 1967, Ballard's escalating intake had become a liability that the Motown machine refused to tolerate. Her alcoholism manifested in missed rehearsals, erratic stage behavior, and a visible physical decline that clashed with the group's meticulously polished aesthetic. Her subsequent firing from the Supremes triggered a catastrophic downward spiral. Without the structural discipline of the group, her drinking intensified as she grappled with a series of failed solo attempts, predatory legal battles, and mounting poverty. Alcohol was no longer a social lubricant. It was a devastating anesthetic for the depression of a woman who had seen the heights of global fame only to be cast into the shadows. The systemic neglect she faced from an industry that profited from her voice while ignoring her cries for help eventually led her to a life on welfare, struggling to provide for her 3 daughters. Florence Ballard's life ended with a sudden tragic finality in 1976. At only 32 years old, she succumbed to a cardiac arrest fueled by years of physiological neglect and the chronic strain that heavy drinking places on the cardiovascular system. While she died in poverty, her legacy has been posthumously rehabilitated as the forgotten Supreme, whose raw talent deserved better than the chemical oblivion she sought. Her journey illustrates the devastating intersection of professional betrayal and substance abuse, serving as a somber reminder that behind the synchronized choreography and glittering gowns, there was a human heart that simply broke under the weight of its own silent song. Marvin Gaye. Marvin Gaye, the Prince of Soul, possessed a velvet tenor that could oscillate between the carnal urgency of "let's get it on" and the socially conscious lament of "what's going on." A man of profound spiritual depth and agonizing internal conflict, Gaye spent his career attempting to reconcile his strict religious upbringing with the hedonistic pressures of global superstardom. This psychological friction, exacerbated by a fractured relationship with his abusive father, created an emotional vacuum that Gaye frequently attempted to fill with chemical solace. While his struggles with cocaine are frequently cited, his reliance on heavy spirits like cognac and vodka served as a persistent, numbing baseline that allowed him to navigate the crushing expectations of his label and his audience. By the late 1970s, Gaye's domestic life and professional stability were in a state of chaotic disintegration. Alcohol became a primary coping mechanism for the depression, triggered by mounting tax debts, 2 volatile divorces, and the death of his singing partner, Tammy Terrell. Friends and collaborators noted that his intake often fueled a dangerous paranoia and intensified his mood swings. The bottle was no longer a tool for relaxation. It was a catalyst for isolation. During his self-imposed exile in Europe, Gaye attempted to cleanse his system, but the siren song of the bottle remained a constant temptation. His return to the U.S. in the early 1980s saw a resurgence in his career with sexual healing. Yet his private reality was marked by a deepening frailty and a reliance on substances to manage the paralyzing anxiety of his comeback tour. The tragic finale of Marvin Gaye's life in 1984 remains one of the most harrowing chapters in music history. On the eve of his 45th birthday, a physical altercation with his father ended in Gaye being shot to death in his own home. While the immediate cause of the tragedy was a domestic dispute, the years of substance abuse had significantly contributed to the toxic environment of instability and mental fragility that preceded the event. Gaye left behind a legacy of unparalleled musical innovation, yet his story is a somber reminder of the divided soul. He was a man who gave the world the ultimate soundtrack for love and social justice, while privately struggling to find peace within a mind clouded by the very substances he hoped would save him. Eddie Griffin. Eddie Griffin, the hyperkinetic dynamo of stand-up and star of Undercover Brother, is a performer whose comedic velocity often feels like a controlled explosion. Born in Kansas City, Griffin's ascent through the ranks of the 1990s comedy boom was fueled by a raw, unapologetic brilliance that spared no one. However, the grueling road life of a touring comic characterized by late-night sets, green room, hospitality, and the perpetual adrenaline spikes of live performance created a fertile environment for heavy drinking. For Griffin, alcohol wasn't just a celebratory luxury, it became a functional tool to manage the jagged come-down from the stage's natural high. This dependency eventually began to bleed into his public persona, manifesting in erratic interviews and a reputation for being a high-stakes wild card in a professional industry that increasingly demanded reliability. The intersection of Griffin's comedic genius and his penchant for spirits led to several high-profile incidents that blurred the line between performance art and personal crisis. Unlike the tragic, quiet descent of others, Griffin's struggle was often loud and visible, fueled by a defiant spirit that resisted traditional intervention. He has been candid about how his intake frequently served as a shield against the pressures of Hollywood's expectations and the inherent loneliness of the spotlight. However, the physiological toll of years of heavy consumption eventually forced a reckoning. Chronic intake began to affect his legendary timing, the most sacred asset of any comedian, and led to health scares that served as a visceral reminder of his mortality. Griffin realized that the very substances he used to enhance his edge were beginning to dull the cognitive sharpness required to maintain his status as a comedic heavyweight. Today at 57, Griffin continues to perform with a seasoned perspective that only comes from surviving the fire. While he remains a provocateur, his relationship with his health has undergone a necessary evolution. He often utilizes his platform to discuss the pitfalls of the industry, speaking with a survivor's grit about the importance of mental clarity in an environment designed to cloud it. His journey illustrates a gritty modern narrative that the life of a comedian is a tightrope walk over an abyss of excess, and that longevity in the spotlight requires a conscious effort to put down the bottle before it puts out the flame. Griffin stands as a resilient figure who chose to preserve his sharp-witted legacy over the temporary deceptive comfort of the chemical haze. Paul Mooney. Paul Mooney, the acerbic visionary behind the legendary routines of Richard Pryor and the boundary-pushing sketches of Chappelle's Show, was the uncompromising godfather of modern black comedy. Born in Shreveport and raised in Oakland, Mooney navigated the entertainment industry with a sharp socio-political intellect that refused to cater to the white gaze. His career was a relentless deconstruction of racial dynamics, delivered with a biting wit that often left audiences both shocked and enlightened. However, the high-stakes environment of 1970s Hollywood and the gritty comedy club circuit provided a backdrop where heavy drinking was normalized as a professional necessity. For Mooney, alcohol initially served as a social lubricant to manage the profound frustrations of being a brilliant black creator in a systemic industry that often undervalued his contributions. During the formative years of his collaboration with Richard Pryor, Mooney was immersed in a lifestyle where boundaries were non-existent. While he was the sober voice of reason in many of Pryor's most volatile moments, Mooney himself grappled with a growing dependency on spirits to cope with the exhaustion of constant writing and performing. The bottle became a private sanctuary from the racial hostility he encountered daily, but it also threatened to erode the precise surgical timing required for his brand of satire. Friends and colleagues noted that while Mooney's intellect remained formidable, the physical toll of chronic intake began to manifest in bouts of irritability and a gradual decline in his legendary stamina. He realized that the truth-teller persona he inhabited on stage required a clarity of mind that the fog of alcohol was beginning to compromise. Unlike many of his peers whose struggles ended in public tragedy, Mooney underwent a quiet, determined recalibration in his later years. He recognized that his longevity as a cultural critic depended on his physiological resilience. By distancing himself from the toxic excesses of the old guard of comedy, Mooney preserved his cognitive sharpness well into his late 70s, continuing to mentor new generations of comedians with an unclouded perspective. When he passed away in 2021 at the age of 79, he left behind a legacy of radical honesty and intellectual courage. His journey serves as a powerful reminder that the most potent weapon against social injustice is a sharp mind, and that maintaining that edge requires the strength to put down the bottle and face the world's harsh truths with an undistorted lens. Nina Simone. Nina Simone, the high priestess of soul, was an artistic titan whose classical training and jazz sensibilities merged to create a voice that shook the foundations of the American status quo. Born Eunice Wayman, she carried the unyielding weight of racial rejection after being denied entry to the Curtis Institute of Music, a scar that never truly healed. As she ascended to global fame, the exhausting duality of her existence as both a world-class performer and a militant civil rights activist created a psychological strain that few could fathom. To quiet the thundering voices of depression and what would later be understood as bipolar disorder, Simone increasingly sought sanctuary in the numbing embrace of high-proof spirits. For Nina, alcohol was not a social accessory. It was a desperate chemical tether to a reality that often felt too painful to inhabit. Throughout the 1960s and 70s, Simone's reliance on spirits became a turbulent factor in her legendary live performances. While her raw emotionality was her greatest asset, the influence of alcohol often tipped her intensity into volatility. Fans and promoters witnessed a spectrum of behavior from transcendent, soul-bearing genius to erratic outbursts and sudden departures from the stage. The bottle became a private confessional for her loneliness and the disillusionment she felt toward a country that resisted her message of liberation. This dependency, coupled with her undiagnosed mental health struggles, led to a period of nomadic exile in Liberia, Switzerland, and France. In these years, the quiet domestic consistency of her drinking served as a corrosive anesthetic, dulling the very precision that had made her a piano prodigy. As she settled in France during her later years, Simone's health began to reflect the cumulative physiological debt of her lifestyle. The synergistic effect of chronic alcohol use and the medications prescribed for her mental health created a delicate, often precarious balance. Yet even as her physical stamina waned, the fire in her spirit remained indomitable. She continued to perform her voice seasoned by the smoke and spirits of 1,000 lonely nights until her passing in 2003 at the age of 70. Nina Simone's journey illustrates the harrowing burden of the tortured genius archetype. Her legacy is a monumental reminder that for those who feel the world's pain too deeply, the bottle can offer a deceptive peace, but true liberation only exists in the unvarnished, sober power of their own truth. Don Cornelius. Don Cornelius, the visionary creator and deep baritone host of Soul Train, was the cultural custodian who brought Black joy, fashion, and rhythm into the living rooms of mainstream America. With his signature sign-off, Love, Peace, and Soul, Cornelius didn't just host a show, he curated a movement that empowered a generation. However, behind the impeccably tailored suits and the calm, sophisticated exterior, Cornelius navigated a high-pressure corporate landscape that demanded constant vigilance. As the architect of a media empire, the logistical stress of managing volatile artists, shifting advertising trends, and the inherent loneliness of being at the top began to take a toll. To decompress from the rigid demands of the hippest trip in America, Cornelius increasingly retreated into the private, numbing sanctuary of high-end spirits. Throughout the 1980s and 90s, while Soul Train continued its legendary run, Cornelius's private health and domestic stability began to fracture. His intake was often a quiet, solitary habit used to manage chronic pain following a complex brain surgery in 1982. This medical trauma, combined with the cumulative physiological strain of heavy drinking, created a volatile internal environment. The bottle was no longer a social accessory, it was a chemical crutch for a man struggling with his declining physical vitality. His dependency eventually manifested in legal troubles and domestic strife, culminating in a 2008 arrest that tarnished his cool public image. This public fall from grace was a jarring reminder that the man who taught the world to dance was privately struggling to keep his own footing against the corrosive tide of addiction. The finale of Don Cornelius's journey was a somber departure that shocked the entertainment world in 2012. At 75 years old, plagued by seizures, dementia, and the long-term neurological erosion caused by years of alcohol use, Cornelius took his own life. His passing was a tragic intersection of physical pain and psychological exhaustion. While he left behind a monumental legacy that paved the way for modern music television, his story serves as a profound cautionary tale about the isolation of success. Don Cornelius proved that while you can build a platform for an entire culture to shine, the private shadows of dependency can eventually dim even the brightest light. His journey reminds us that a love, peace, and soul must also be cultivated within oneself, to survive the relentless pressures of the spotlight. Robin Harris. Robin Harris, the quintessential old-school voice of 1980s South Central comedy, was a lightning bolt of authentic wit whose influence far outlasted his brief time in the spotlight. Best known for his recurring BB's Kids routine and his scene-stealing role in House Party, Harris possessed a rhythmic, rapid-fire delivery that felt like a conversation over a backyard fence. He was the undisputed king of the Comedy Act Theater, a venue that served as the heartbeat of Black Los Angeles. However, the meteoric rise of his career wrought an exhausting schedule of red-eye flights, back-to-back club sets, and the relentless pressure to provide for an expanding circle of dependents. To manage the physical fatigue and the adrenaline-fueled insomnia inherent in the life of a touring comic, Harris increasingly relied on spirits to level out after his high-energy performances. Throughout the late 1980s, as Hollywood began to beckon with major film deals and animation projects, the toll of Harris's lifestyle began to manifest in subtle but dangerous ways. He was a man who lived at a breakneck pace, often performing multiple sets a night while consuming alcohol as a social and professional lubricant. This dependency was rarely seen as a problem by his peers because Harris remained impeccably funny and professionally sharp. Yet beneath the laughter, his cardiovascular system was under immense duress. Chronic intake combined with a high-stress environment and a lack of restorative sleep created a lethal physiological environment. The bottle wasn't a visible demon for Robin. It was a silent accelerant to a pre-existing condition of high blood pressure that he frequently ignored in favor of the next big break. The final curtain fell with shocking suddenness in 1990. After a sold-out performance in Chicago, Harris retired to his hotel room and passed away in his sleep from a massive heart attack. At only 36 years old, he left behind a pregnant wife and a comedy world in mourning. While his official cause of death was cardiac failure, the cumulative impact of heavy drinking on his heart's rhythm and overall resilience was a significant contributing factor to his early demise. Robin Harris's journey is a somber reminder of the brightest candle theory. He burned with an intensity that illuminated an entire culture, but the chemical fuel he used to sustain that flame ultimately consumed the vessel. He remains a beloved icon, a man who taught us how to laugh at the chaos of life, while his story serves as a visceral plea to protect the heart behind the humor. The saga of these 15 icons reveals a haunting paradox. The same fire that fueled their creative brilliance often consumed their physical existence. From the rhythmic soul of Marvin Gaye to the comedic rawness of Richard Pryor, alcohol was the silent ghost in the dressing room, a deceptive sanctuary from the crushing weight of systemic pressure and global fame. At Black Excellence Legends, we honor their genius while unmasking the shadows they walk through. But this raises a piercing question for us all. Is the tortured artist an inevitable price of greatness, or does society demand a level of soul-bearing performance that makes sobriety nearly impossible to maintain? What do you think? Can true legendary art exist without the dark influence of the bottle?